This is the Best or Worst podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Koji Stefan Sakai and M. Martin Mapoma.
All right, welcome. This is the Best or Worst podcast. I am Martin.
And I am Mr. Koji.
Mr. Koji, and welcome everybody. Our society is so focused on celebrity, we sometimes forget that regular people lead interesting lives too. Best or worst moment of your life. Hosts Koji Stefan Sakai and M. Martin Mapoma, that's me and that's him, I should have done that earlier, are here to let your story out. We put people on the spot. What are you going to hear? It could be funny, it could be poignant, it could be sad. You'll know when we know. And today I am super excited. Oh, by the way, this is episode number 94, right, Koji?
95, actually.
95, okay.
Okay.
So close.
It's okay.
Doesn't matter, folks. But anyway, so I'm really super stoked to have my buddy, Mr. Stefan Shakiba, on the show today.
Hello,
Steph, what's up?
Thank you guys for having me.
How are you?
You know, it's kind of interesting because I told Martin earlier, I'm not used to the guy being in the spotlight. So this is a little new to me. I'm actually used to the guy being in the background helping the guy in the spotlight.
Steph's a kingmaker.
What do you do?
King.
Tell us what you do.
So for a profession, I'm a psychotherapist. I did my training in South Central and East LA, and I treat as a mental health clinician, trauma, depression, anxiety, you name it, the whole gamut.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I remember Martin telling me you work with in sports as well.
I do. I actually work right now with quite a few athletes, and I usually don't share that with people anymore as much as I used to, but I help athletes with performance.
Okay. What's the number one thing that most athletes need to hear that they're not hearing?
Well, I think a lot of people forget that athletes are human and that, stress, mental illness, whatever it is, doesn't discriminate just because someone happens to be incredibly talented. And, I'm pretty open about this. The biggest reason why athletes come to me, and I work heavily with baseball players, is because they've always been talented enough. If you throw 93 miles an hour in college, if you can run a 4.5 40-yard dash, if you can hit 450-foot bombs, baseball and sports are going to be a lot easier at the amateur levels. But once you go pro, the talent pool starts to even out. And when that happens, stats go down, confidence gets tested. And I think it's symbolic of life. They've always worked so hard on their physical game that they've neglected the mental game, and they come to me to build that mental game.
That's hilarious. I remember I was listening to Colin Cowherd on the radio, and he was talking to Brian Scaberlini, who is a Boston Celtic, and he's this tall Caucasian dude, red hair. And so people used to make fun of him because on the court he looks kind of gangly and a little like uncoordinated. But he was being interviewed, and he's like, people make fun of me, but what they don't understand is if I played basketball against them, I would kill them. He's like, I only look this way because when I'm standing next to Russell Westbrook, who is an out of this world athlete, one of a kind, he makes everybody look like, like they're uncoordinated. But in reality, he, like you said, he was the best elementary school player. He was the best middle school player. He was the best high school player. He's probably the best high school player in the state. He was the best college player. He was the best, and he was actually a decent NBA player. He just wasn't, an all-star or anything, but that's a really interesting thing to hear about athletes.
Was he at the Lakers? Who's the guy at the Lakers that's kind of gangly? They make fun of him, but the guy can ball.
Alex Caruso. But Alex Caruso is actually good.
But when I first saw Alex Caruso, on the court warming up, I was like, is that one of the ball boys? I was with you, Coach, at that game. And I was like, and you're like, dude, that guy can ball. And sure enough, it came in, and I was like, what?
Yeah, no, Caruso's plus minus, which is a stat of like how much better your team is when you're playing versus when you're not playing. I mean, his plus minus is like second highest on the team. I mean, he affects the game more than almost any player except for LeBron James. And the thing is, like, if you look at his stats, he's like 5 points, 4 rebounds, like 3 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block. And you're like, this guy's terrible. Why does everybody talk about him? But it's only the players or the fans that aren't watching the game. You don't realize that he was like the guy diving for the ball. He's the guy that took the charge. He's the guy that got the rebound and made the right pass before the pass, which shot the ball. So sorry, we're going totally on a side track here.
That actually sounds a lot like my life. I'm the guy who has the thankless job. So the person that I help gets the thanks.
Come on, Steph.
Well,
Steph is also he's also a fellow hot pepper fanatic. He loves hot peppers like I do.
Big fan. You know, I'm right now.
What's
I'm
that?
at the habanero level, and I
Oh,
got
not
Danny
bad.
Cat.
Not bad. Okay. Me and my couple of my buddies. Oh wait, you met JT, Steph, my buddy JT.
I remember meeting him vaguely. Yes.
Yeah, we because camping. Anyway, we did this. Coach, you might have heard about the Tube of Terror challenge with Johnny Scoville, and oh my God, it was the first time that I got wrecked with hot food.
That sounds
Anyway, oh my God, I thought I was gonna die. That we should do a whole show on that, Koji. If I could get Johnny Scoville on the show, it was bananas. Anyway, that being said, let's get back to Steph because this is gonna be a good one because I love what Steph does for a living. It's
I would
really,
love
really
to hear,
cool.
both Martin and I are dads, and we have
Yep.
kids that are doing sports and different sports. What's the best advice you have for the parent who is kind of watching the kids and working with them?
The biggest mistake you could do is let anger or anxiety could dictate how you work with them, because what children need the most is they need support, and they need positive support and focused on what to do right instead of what they're doing wrong. And a little while ago, they did a study for little leaguers who are 12 years old, and they wanted to figure out what's the best way to maximize their performance. And they broke them down into 3 groups. They gave one group complete criticism, one group constructive criticism, and one group complete praise. Of those 3 groups, which one do you think far outperformed the others?
Complete praise.
Okay. I was going to say the second one, but
Why the
No,
second
no.
one?
well, because I thought it was a trick question. It sounded like a trick question. That's why.
And again,
I think I only knew the reason. I only knew the answer to that one because working with Primal Play, working with my kids. That's one of the things you learn early on, that kids do not respond to criticism on any level. Never.
Although would you say that some kids though are motivated differently? I mean, because I think that, because for example, like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That some kids I'm not personally this person, but I think some kids need to be talked to in different ways. Like for example, when I would play sports, if a coach yelled at me, I would just break down, right? Like that. I couldn't, I'd go out there and make errors and I just couldn't play anymore. But I had teammates that if you did the same thing to those teammates, they wouldn't get better. Like they had to be screamed at and told that you suck. Like, does that play a factor in it?
Well, there's, and sorry, Coach, I don't mean to jump on Steph again, but there are 3 or 4 different types of athletes. There are, super talented, super motivated, which is what everybody wants. A kid who's like really good and just responds to motivation. Those are the kids that you don't have to say much to. You can say, good job. They're usually the leaders. You have kids who are super talented, super excited to be there, super motivated, but super untalented. And those are the kids you have to nurture a little more. Then you have the kids who are talented, but no motivation. And there's different ways to work with kids, but
not even that. Like I wasn't like an all-star and everything I played, but I was still very fragile as a athlete. Like
no, yeah. So you were the kind of kid that you'd have to you gently nudge them along. You don't.
Yeah. But I was motivated.
I
was super motivated. I just was like very fragile. But I had friends that were. But anyway, Steph, tell me what you think about that.
No, I think you're absolutely right, both of you. You treat the person, not the overall picture, because everybody requires something else to motivate them. And I think the same goes for adulthood. Some people need a little bit of fear or anger by a coach to motivate them. Although what we see too, a lot of people need more nurture. Mm-hmm. And one of the big mistakes we see with coaching these days is a player may have a mental issue and they may be intimidated to bring it up to their coach because they're fear that there's going to be a consequences, either being benched or criticized or shunned. But what coaches need to do is create an open door policy and do what they do best, which is to teach and to train. And every athlete's a little bit different, but so you kind of have to take everything into account. What motivates the individual, not what you think motivates the majority.
Yeah. Although it's funny because I was just listening to a story. Kobe Bryant was telling a story about after his 8th grade, he played summer league basketball in 8th grade, and he scored 0 points in the entire season. And he remember like he said, it was a turning point because his father came up to him, who's a professional athlete, and his father told him, "I don't care, I still love you." And for Kobe, what he said was that it meant a lot because he realized that it didn't matter if he did well or if he did poorly, that he had his father's love, and that gave him the not motivation, but the like there was no fall. There's no failing because no matter what, he had his father's love, and so he's going to go out. And then he said, at the same time, I never wanted to feel that way again. So then obviously he like from that point on he became Kobe, right? But I thought that was such a really interesting story, even for somebody who is so highly motivated. I mean, Kobe, I'm sure at 5 years old was the same as he is at 20, right? Where he became like an all-star. But I think that was a really interesting story and something I definitely take to heart as a father.
Yeah, love shouldn't be conditional.
Well, so does your kid play sports?
So my older one, he's 9 years old. He likes to play a lot of baseball, and I do a lot of mental stuff with him. It's going to be different what you do with a 9-year-old than what you do with an adult. But that's more just so he can enjoy the experience a lot more and deal with adversity. Because baseball's an unforgiving sport.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As for my 5-year-old, he does baseball and gymnastics. He kind of fell into gymnastics because he's doing cartwheels around the house, and we had to get it to stop. So
I remember him doing that stuff, man. When we were camping, I was like, man, this kid's like athletic.
Yeah, he's a little more athletic than his brother, although his brother has some serious skills too. But they're young. Right now, I just want them to have fun and make the best of it.
Yeah. Baseball is a very weird sport in that it's one of those sports that almost has what I tell my son is that it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing in baseball. It's almost just like you do your job, which like you hit the ball when you can, you field the ball when you can, you throw the ball to the right base when you can, but everything outside of that is not under your control. So you could have the best game and still lose. Like unlike basketball or soccer or some of these other team sports, it's like if you're the best player in a basketball team, you could actually dictate the entire game. Like you could control the game, you could win the game. But baseball is like you could be the best player like Mike Trout and never make the playoffs for the entire career. So it's a very interesting sport. Like I was just actually listening to Derek Jeter. He was talking about how he only has positive people around him during the season because he doesn't. It's such a mental game, right? It's like you go up to bat, you strike out or you hit or whatever, and then you wait 3 innings before you come up again, and you have to kind of mentally just forget about what happened, right? And you have to come back and just do it again, whether you sick. So actually for my son, we have a mantra that I tell him for baseball, which is fuck it doesn't matter what just happened, I'm still the best player on this team. Because like if he strikes out, that's what you tell yourself. If you get a home run, it doesn't matter. You still have to have that confidence that you're still the best player. And whether you are or not, it doesn't matter. It's just a matter of like feeling that power and that strength of like being the best player, and wanting to become that best player. And regardless of what you just did, because he gets down on himself a little bit and he feels great. He feels great when he's great.
Is that the whole phrase he says though? He says that whole phrase like, fuck it, I'm still the best player on this team.
Yeah. His mom doesn't like that. Yeah.
Oh, I would love to hear that kid say that. That's gotta be the best. Coach's kid's awesome. It drives him crazy when I say that. His kid's awesome. By the way, speaking of, because Steph, man, you're being very modest about this, but you were a hell of a baseball player too, dude.
I was okay. I mean, when you say hell of a baseball player, you're looking at professional level and so forth. I walked on to baseball. I was recruited initially for tennis because I was a tennis player, and so my baseball career got cut short just around high school time.
Tennis is really difficult too, though.
Yeah,
I mean that's really hard.
Yeah, tennis and golf because everything it has to do with precision. And so there's very little room for error. And it's a lonely game because it's not a team game. So it's just you and the other guy.
Yeah.
So, I was burnt out and I quit. And 2 years later, I just started throwing a baseball and happened to be throwing it hard enough to be able to go walk on for the team.
That's why I love my son doing jiu-jitsu because it's a good counter to the team sports. It's when he goes to fight at a tournament, it's himself versus this other person. And you can't kind of fall into the background as one of the other players, but he has to be the main person.
Yep.
Well, one of the things about this is really interesting in terms of sports psychology. Has this field kind of changed over the last like 5 to 10 years? Has it grown more acceptable, or has it always been kind of something that people have thought about?
It's a lot more acceptable these days. Before it's taboo. If you came out and said, hey, I don't know how to deal with my anxiety, or I'm throwing up before games, and you shared that to somebody, people would look at you funny. But I think over the last 10 years, maybe even more so the 5 years, it's become acceptable to recognize that athletes are human too. And look at the athletes you see coming out with bipolar, who may pass from drug addiction, like that guy from the Angels. And people always seem very surprised. Johnny Manziel, they always seem surprised when this happens, like they have everything together. How could they let this happen? Because they live vicariously and idealize them. But again, they're human beings too. Steve Young came out, I think, not too long ago about, before the Super Bowl, he was doing some trauma work apparently, based on his upbringing. Mental health doesn't discriminate, and there's a lot of trauma in football and basketball. I can tell you that.
Although before, people just didn't talk about it. Like Mickey Mantle was drinking, like he was an alcoholic right before as he was a player. But nowadays, I mean, if you were drinking every night before a game, it'd come out at some point that, because there's a lot of NBA players who have come out talking about depression or talking about anxiety, especially during the bubble last year. But there's still stigma though, right? There's still a big stigma around mental illness, especially in a locker room and amongst fans even, right?
Well, and I do want to separate mental illness from performance, because you see both. And so, but the same thing applies. Performance doesn't care how good an athlete you are. And same thing with mental illness. So again, those are two different things, but the statistics are about the same.
Wasn't there there was a basketball player a few years ago who, I forgot where he came out of college, but he was a top pick. I want to say maybe came out of Houston, or he was drafted by the Houston Rockets. And he was having mental health issues. And you remember, he couldn't play. He wouldn't play. He wanted to get some help. He wanted some time from the team.
He had issues with airplanes. Like he couldn't fly on an airplane.
No, that's not like I'm thinking of. Okay. There was a player who had mental health issues.
No, that was the mental health issues that he was deathly afraid of airplanes, and he wouldn't fly, which is a big deal in the NBA because you fly everywhere, right? And he was a top pick, and so there's a big controversy around how do you.
He's out of basketball now, right?
Yeah, he could. I mean, he couldn't play. I mean, if you can't fly on an airplane, you literally can't play basketball for the NBA.
And he lost his whole contract and everything.
Yeah. But people people have spoken out about it, and like Kevin Love has spoken about depression and dealing with it, and other players have too, in terms of it coming out a lot more. But you're right. I think we idolize these players in a way that they feel like they're gods. They're like our Greek gods. And then when, if they show any kind of weakness, it's almost like it makes us feel like they're not, like we want to make fun of them on Twitter as opposed to feel for them as human beings,
Right. And, I'm assuming you're familiar with Moneyball and Billy Beane. He had all the 5 tools. He had the tools. If he hadn't become GM, you probably would have never heard of him. Well, just think of all the people you've never heard of that were that talented.
Yeah.
And so when people come to me, they're among the most vulnerable. And part of what kind of hurts my business is, I keep them confidential. I don't go around name dropping, and I guarantee them confidentiality. So everybody I get is completely through referrals. But I want every athlete out there to know there is help, and you're never too good to ask for those 3 magic words. I need help.
Yeah. I mean, look at Max Muncy, right? He was a guy in Oakland Athletics. He was going to be a star. He was a great hitter. And then all of a sudden he stopped hitting. He couldn't hit anymore. He even quit. I think he almost retired or was retired. And then his father worked with him, and he came back, and now he's a starter on the Dodgers, or he was a starter on the Dodgers. And he was not only just a starter, he regained his form, and that's completely 100% mental. It wasn't injury. It wasn't anything else. It was just him coming and really starting to believe in himself. And I don't know if that was like it was a mental block, not a mental, issue. Right. But it's still like it's a performance. It's a performance. Baseball is like weird in that way. Right.
All sports are in their own unique way. Yeah. So with basketball and football, it's a fast paced game. You look at like baseball, the challenge of baseball, tennis, golf, it's a stop and go sport. So there's a lot of downtime. But in basketball, you're more likely to get into the flow or the zone. When that happens, you're just hyper focused on what you're doing. There's no concept of time, and there should be less overthinking in the fast paced sport. So every sport is completely different.
Yeah. But then in basketball, even if it's fast paced, though, I think people, when they get in their heads, you can tell. You can tell a lot. Like I think one of the statistics that people always look at is the free throw percentage. If your free throw percentage, a lot of times what you'll find is like they're shooting like 50% of free throw line, even though they're shooting 80% from somewhere else on the floor. And it's just purely because they're kind of, also because it slows down, right? And everyone's looking at you, and all of a sudden you have to shoot the ball. But yeah, it's really
it's much more mental.
What?
Yeah, I think you just summed up Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, because I mean, he always said that
Hack-a-Shaq.
he made the shots in practice, right? He made those shots in practice, and they're NBA players. They could make the shot. It's just right when you're on that line and everyone's looking at you and the game's stopped. It's a lot more challenging. That's one of the reasons Steph Curry is so amazing, is that he has so much confidence, especially when he's
Yeah.
on, and he's able to kind of do that. One of the things I looked up about Kobe Bryant was he was the kind of player who he could shoot 50 times and miss all 50 shots, and then the next game he'll come and shoot 100 just to make a point. Like, that's the kind of confidence, right? Like, most players, like Lamar Odom, for example, he was the kind of player, if he missed the first couple of shots, that was it. Like, he wouldn't keep shooting the ball. I mean, he's this uber talented young man at the time, and he just didn't have the same mental makeup that Kobe did. And that's what made Kobe special, I think, was that his, like, that belief in himself. He didn't care.
Lamar Odom.
And that's a whole topic on trust and confidence. And if you believe in yourself and know you're good enough, you're going to have that. And sometimes you need that track record too. So Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, they know they're good enough. And so no matter how they just did, no matter how poorly or well they did, it doesn't matter, because they know how talented they are.
Yeah, and everyone around him knows, so they give him. You're right. They give him more room, right? Because if it's Kobe Bryant, it's LeBron, they're gonna do their thing. But if you're like the 15th person on the bench and you're missing like a bunch of shots, you're probably gonna be taken out of the game very soon, or cut from the team, right? So I guess you're right. It has a lot to do with context and a lot to do with your where you are in your career. I could talk about sports all day.
I know. You've been real chatty, man.
I love sports. I'm so sorry.
I was like, hey, are we interviewing Steph, or what's happening here?
what's the one piece of advice you would give to kids outside of their parents who are trying to be athletes or playing sports and doing their thing?
That's easy. Have fun. If you don't have fun, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yep. Having fun for kids in sports is the one way to keep them involved in sports, because, and again, as a youth fitness specialist, I deal with that all the time. So many parents that, so many parents don't want to play the long game with their kids when it comes to athletics. They want that cookie cutter sort of cliff notes of, they want their kids to succeed like right away. They want them to be the state champions at 8 years old. That's why you see so many stories about these awful coaches just getting ripped to shreds by, society, because it's just too much. So,
and how does
have fun,
right? How does the saying go? Your child is not going to get a college scholarship today.
Yeah, exactly. I tell, Steph, man, I could, I've dealt with a couple of parents at our school, just like, oh, dude, they want their kids to skip the fundamentals, where the fundamentals are a lot of fun, and go right to like the high skill, the high skill open looped exercises that the kids are not ready for. Then the kids fail at that. The parents yell at them, and the kids are like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's what I teach all my kids when I'm working with them. Whether it's my sports performance kids or my fitness kids, I'm like, guys, just to have fun. Well, we got to win this game. No, you don't. I understand you want to win, but if you don't, first of all, you're 12, you're 13. Life is not going to end. Have fun. You're so right when you say that stuff. You're so right. If the kids are not having fun, there's no way you're going to get them to. You're not going to get your kid to stay active in that sport for the rest of their life. They're not going to join the adult leagues or the after work leagues to play those sports, because they're going to be done.
Know what? That's why I quit tennis. Got recruited to play tennis at Cal. First day of practice, I was walking there with my bag. I thought to myself, you know what? I'm a brand new college student. I get to have a lot of experiences. I got a girlfriend. Screw it. I was burnt out. And that's exactly what happens if you stop having fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate everybody. So we're going to be listening. We're going to be talking to our guests in 2 days. We're going to ask him about his best or worst moment. And I'll stop talking, I promise, in that episode. Thank you. So thank you, Steph. Thank you.
Don't make promises you can't keep. You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.
And please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll see you again in 2 days. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.